Hello, everybody. I'm Richard Sher. It's time to square off. Let's meet the panel for this week's very hot show. Here is your panel. Talk show host Jimmy Mathis is back. Attorneys Chris Kennedy, Thiru Vignarajah, and making her return, her triumphant return to square off, attorney Yuripzy Morgan. Great to have you back.
Great to be here.
There is panic exploding in Washington, D.C. throughout the federal government. Millions of federal employees are panicking because they're afraid that they are losing their jobs. As President Trump's hatchet man, Elon Musk, the richest man in the world, continues to slash federal workers and programs, both here and overseas. Let's welcome back Yuripzy and hear what she has to say. Yuripzy.
Thank you for having me back, Richard. So listen, I understand the concern. My neighborhood is mainly federal workers. My husband is a federal worker, but I can tell you that there's a big difference, I think, between the process by which this is happening. I understand the concern there, but the reality is that the federal government has ballooned to an immense size and cost. And so much of it has to do with unnecessary spending. So we can disagree with the method by which this is happening, Elon Musk, and whether or not he's been vetted. But the reality is the federal government, the size has to shrink, and the spending is out of control.
Thiru.
Look, I don't think that the dispute is about the manner as much as it is the degree. Yuripzy, I think you and I would both agree. I think a lot of people would agree that there are spending cuts that are necessary and appropriate and can be executed in a measured and moderate way at the state level as well as at the federal level. But going from tens of thousands of employees to 300 employees in USAID in the span of a month is not about how it's being done, it's the degree to which it is being done. There is plenty of fat in the system to cut, but when you cut it all together, you are overcorrecting for the problem.
Jimmy Mathis.
We can't balance the books. It's that simple. There's more going out than coming in. It's not that complicated.
Well, it seems to be bothering a lot of people. Go on, Jimmy. Sorry to interrupt.
Look, and I'm not dumping on people that have federal jobs. They do. They serve a legitimate purpose, but we spend more than we take in. And at some point that has to be accountable. And that's where we're at right now. And it's going to hurt some people. It is. And that's where we're at.
All right. Well, then the show's over. Thank you. Have a good weekend.
It's not. Here's the thing, Richard. At
What?
the end of the day, it's really not that complicated. I've been talking about this on the radio for the last 2 decades. It comes to spending. It comes to debts. It comes to unfunded liabilities. I've been talking about this forever, and people don't care. This is what it looks like.
Jimmy, the problem is that there are periods when we run at a surplus and there are periods that we run at a deficit. And the spending spree started, whether it was justified by COVID or not, during Trump's first administration. We ran up a massive, massive thing. And of course we do have to correct. But the notion that we correct by slash and burning major agencies, by dismantling the Department of Education, USAID, asking every federal employee to retire with a 6-month package, that's just not how you run good government.
Hold on, Jimmy.
Richard, so much.
Jimmy, stop. We haven't heard from Chris Kennedy yet. Stop, Jimmy, stop. Go ahead, Chris.
Thank you, Jimmy. Listen, I think we can all agree that there's too much debt. I think it's 36 trillion, maybe 40. And there are some programs and agencies that have not been audited in decades, and they need auditing. If you could just give me another second, Jimmy, I'd really be grateful. Thanks.
Let him speak.
So there's definitely fat that needs to be cut. But I look at this from a medical standpoint because it's the kind of law I do. Before a surgical oncologist goes in and starts cutting out tissue and organs, you first have to do diagnostic studies and lab work to find out if there's cancer, where it is, what kind it is, and where it needs to be cut out from. So an accounting needs to take place in a responsible way before you start cutting. And I don't mean, Jimmy, over the course of 2 years. I mean in the next month. That can be done. And I don't mind Musk's people doing that responsibly. But listen, there are some tent hospitals in some of the worst, most hard-hit parts of the world that are going to run out of medicine and food within the next week or two. And God help all of us if there's kids and patients who die at those hospitals because the USAID workers were kicked out.
Okay, so go ahead.
I have a couple of things I want to say. Hold on a minute, Jimmy. Is Yuripzy still here? Okay.
She's coming back on. She lost the connection. She's coming back on.
Anyway,
Jimmy, you got to stop. This is a very divided United States. As you know, Democrats are filing lawsuits, demonstrating, protesting actions being taken by Donald Trump without any congressional approval, creating a constitutional crisis in this country like this country's never seen. Many Republicans are thrilled with the speed at which Trump and gazillionaire Elon Musk are slashing federal workers and life-saving programs like USAID, which employs 8,000 direct hires and contractors, along with 5,000 international staffers who would continue to run the few life-saving programs. The USAID workforce would be left with choked up, would be left with less than 300 people. That is not right. Or is it? Go ahead, Jimmy. Now, do not.
What's the constitutional issue on this, Richard?
What?
What is the constitutional issue on this?
Well, not being a constitutional scholar,
right?
I would assume it has to do with the powers of the president, Congress, and how these things are supposed to be approved or disapproved. Yuripzy, have you been listening?
I caught the tail end of that.
I thought we were talking to me, but okay.
No, we were, yeah.
Back in.
Go ahead, Jimmy.
We're talking about co-equal branches of government, of separation of powers. Like, what are we talking about on this? Seriously, Rich. Okay, like, honestly, what are we even talking about right now?
Jimmy, let you go first, but I'm going to frame this to Jimmy specifically because I actually think there's a lot more consensus in this group because we are all fiscally responsible people. We all believe that the budget ought to be balanced as much as possible. We don't believe in frivolous spending. We do think that forensic audits ought to be done. You know, something that all of us have advocated for at the local level is that you go to a forensic audit, find out where the waste is happening, and then you cut that waste. We couldn't agree more. But the notion that you can do that unilaterally, and I think the reason why Elon Musk has gotten so much attention is the approach that works at Twitter, which has driven Twitter's valuation into the ground, but has made Elon Musk very, very wealthy independently, is not something that you do to government. And there's a bunch of different reasons for that, but the division of power is that Congress has the power of the purse. A lot of these things are congressional authorizations. A lot of these things do have limits that are put in place. For example, you can't allocate money beyond what has been provided for by Congress. So when you say we're going to give you a 9-month severance package, that is almost going to be cut down.
With
Jimmy, Jimmy.
Go ahead, Jimmy.
Jimmy Mathis, wait up, because Yuripzy is back. We want to hear from her. She's actually a fourth of the panel.
Well, listen, first of all, sorry for the internet miscommunication here. But look, I'll say, I think that what Thiru is saying sounds great in theory, but the problem is that we're not talking theory, right? In theory, yes, you could go through with a scalpel and you could look at, where the spending is going, and you could make certain cuts where they need to be made. But come on, this is reality. And in reality, we have a very bloated government that has been spending gobs of money on the most ridiculous things, particularly with USAID. The money that has been allocated to different entities and for all these crazy things. This is the problem. This is why people are so frustrated. And I think this is why you are seeing a significant amount of support for Elon Musk, is because one, he has the track record of maintaining successful businesses, making a lot of money, and the federal government has done the opposite. And as soon as you even start pulling back the cover and seeing just a little bit of how mismanaged taxpayer dollars have been, people start perking up and saying, you know what? We've given politicians decades to
Right.
do any semblance of what's happening right now. And guess what has happened? Nothing. So maybe,
All right.
maybe we do need a
So
disruptor.
Right. All right, Jimmy, it's your turn.
this is a dereliction of duty with the House of Representatives that has the power of the. There's a reason they're elected every 2 years. They're most accountable to the people. Okay. This whole thing works when the voters hold these co-equal branches accountable. Okay. I mean, it works for a reason if the electorate is willing to do it. And yeah, there's a reason why the House controls the purse strings. Am I wrong on this? Okay. Am I?
Jimmy, if you don't
No,
speak a
no,
lot of,
you're not. That's why they created checks and balances. That's why the
Right.
founders put Article 1 for the legislature and spread the power out as much as they could, so that one guy in Article 2 or a group of people in Article 3, the Supreme Court, don't get to decide what happens in America all by themselves.
all right, here's what we're going to do. We're going to stop for a moment. Howard Mallison, the voice of Square Off, is going to come on, going to tell you about some of our fabulous sponsors. Then we're going to talk about Elon Musk. We're going to talk about Donald Trump. How's it going there almost 3 weeks later? Howard Mallison.
Thank you, Richard. You know, Baltimore is a great diner town, and the Double T diners are always voted number one in reader polls. TT stands for totally terrific. For breakfast, lunch, or dinner, you can't beat the enormous menu selections that'll bring you back again and again. There's Double T locations on Route 40 West, Perry Hall, White Marsh, Bel Air, Laurel, Annapolis, Pasadena, and the EC Diner in Ellicott City. Plus, try By the Docks in Middle River for their Monday night lobster special. All part of the Double T family. Tell them you heard about them from Richard Square. Richard Sher on Square Off.
Richard Square. Go ahead.
Richard Square. You know, we would like to welcome our newest sponsor to Square Off, Dr. Kelly Gagan. She's a board-certified podiatrist and heel specialist. Both Richard and I are her very satisfied clients.
Yeah.
Dr. Gagan knows that the appearance of your feet matter just as much as correcting any problems. And if you experience any kind of toenail issues, which embarrass you to wear sandals or open-toed shoes,
Oh,
and have
yeah.
tried over-the-counter treatments that don't work, laser treatment is easy, goes right to the cause of the appearance of your toes, and may be right for you. So give Dr. Gagan a call at 410-753-4422 to set up an appointment. It really works. Back to you, Rich.
All right. If I had time, I'd show you my feet, but I'll spare you that. So, what are your thoughts about Elon Musk and the power he has, and the fact that so many programs and so many people are being so drastically put out of work? I mean, I don't know what to say. Chris, go ahead.
Yeah, so his power is more extraordinary than you think. This is not just going in with his Doge Bros and cutting jobs and cutting funding and cutting programs. And again, the responsible areas, fraud, waste, abuse, I'm all for that. But his power to the point where he has threatened moderate Republican senators with being primaried, and that he will fund the primary race against them unless they change their mind and vote for Trump's cabinet appointees, is striking. And it's scary, because there were several moderate Republican senators who wanted to vote against RFK Jr., but were forced to change their mind. Even with Pam Bondi. And the Kash Patel vote hasn't taken place yet, but it's going to be the same thing. And then with Tulsi Gabbard, I don't think she was going to get out of committee. But again, Musk went in, he threatened every one of those Republican senators with a primary challenge and would fund every one of them. And to a T, every one of them backed down. That is a scary level of power, because now this guy is controlling several branches of government, and that should never happen.
First of all,
Yuripzy, were you just shaking your head? Yes.
No, listen, I agree with Chris. I think the issue is that we really should look at Congress, because you got to think, why would so many people, and I completely agree with Chris about the extraordinary power and the concern with the extraordinary power that Elon Musk has. But however, why is it that so many people are willing to accept it? And I think the reason is because of how poorly a job Congress has done for so many decades, that they're willing to let, anybody in now, apparently, to do whatever, just to have some sort of semblance of a balanced government or responsibility in fiscal spending. That's a problem.
Thiru and then Jimmy. Thiru and Jimmy.
I don't think people fully fathom what $400 billion looks like. Elon Musk has amassed more money and more power than perhaps any person in the history, certainly of this country. I mean, you've got to go back to the robber barons under McKinley to find anything resembling the kind of aggregation of power that he has. And I think what's troubling is Elon Musk is actually really great at building up companies. He's not actually good at inheriting a company and fixing it. So to the extent that you want to use his business acumen as a guidepost for what he can do, he didn't take Twitter and make it better. He took a great company that was doing actually quite well and drove it into the ground. He built up Tesla. He built up SpaceX. And by the way, he did half of those ventures because the federal government funded a lot of it. So the irony of what he is doing by cutting and slashing and burning, except in the places like DOD, where his companies will specifically benefit, this is the worst possible imaginable.
All right, Jimmy.
All right. Well, somebody that has spent a quarter century in D.C. and on Capitol Hill, this is not about the White House, the Capitol, or the Supreme Court. This is the unelected agencies, which is what we're talking about right now. It is the Department of Agriculture. It's the Department of Education. All these agencies that go up and down, okay, Constitution Avenue. That's what we're talking about. On cutting the power and the funding, we can block grant the funding to the states, which is what Trump was talking about in LA, what he's talking about with education. People get beat up on them all they want. That's fine. But there is no reason that you should have unelected bureaucracies that are controlling states, which is what we have right now. And it's totally unconstitutional.
All right.
And this is where I think Jimmy and I are going to have to part company, because the rise of the administrative state has had a lot of things that have gone wrong. There's no question there are places where it could be curbed. But the notion that we shouldn't have a federal Department of Education, the notion that we can gut that to zero, that is something that neither Democratic nor Republican presidents have considered seriously in 50 years. Milton Friedman is a brilliant economist, but his approach to government was rejected.
With all due respect, you're talking about money. I'm not saying don't cut all federal money to the states. I'm not saying that. All I'm saying is allow the states to allocate it how they see best fit. And not even at the state level, but really at the most.
All right, guys.
That's what I'm saying on it.
Stop. At his Tuesday news conference, we have a lot to cover in a little bit of time. At his news conference on Tuesday with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, Trump jolted the world when he pledged to take over the Gaza Strip, perhaps to build a new Gaza Strip in another country, perhaps relocating millions of Palestinians and building them a beautiful new space, which he calls the Riviera, the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, in a clear and very explicit response, says it will not stop its tireless work towards the establishment of an independent state. Their response to President Trump, a firm and it is unwavering. It's a big no. Chris?
Yeah, the Riviera of the Middle East. Whenever we're trying to figure out what Donald Trump's up to, I think the easy way to do that, if there is an easy way, is to just think about money. So what is his end game? My feeling is his end game is that he's trying to get the United States and ultimately the Trump Corporation with a joint venture with the United States to have exclusive rights to do the cleanup in Gaza and to do the rebuilding in Gaza and to cash in with some redevelopment of residential communities with his son-in-law. And so that's what I think he's trying for. I think he's trying to threaten the Panama Canal because he wants to have U.S. Navy ships not have to pay or pay full price to go through the canal. They have to pay the same rate as all the other ships. That's, I think, his end game there. So the shock and outrage that he's coming out with these moves has an end game that all deals with money, either saving the United States money, which is admirable, or making money himself by using the United States to do so.
All right, one of Trump's executive orders ending birthright citizenship has been blocked by a U.S. District Court Judge, Deborah Boardman. She's issued a nationwide preliminary injunction against Trump's attempt to end birthright citizenship. Yuripzy, what's your reaction to that?
Not surprised. Not surprised at all. As a matter of fact, this morning on MSNBC, they had an attorney on that was saying that generally speaking, most learned attorneys, most basic attorneys are looking at these so-called constitutional crises, these executive orders, and kind of rolling their eyes and saying this is not a serious proposal. Any judge worth their salt is going to see right through these. The problem is that the media, which I think has some pretty intelligent people on their staff, refuses to tell the general public that. And so you end up with a situation where there is mass fear and concern when anybody who knows half of the Constitution can tell you these were never serious proposals. And this is one thing that I'm surprised that the media has, I think they just simply refuse to understand Donald Trump. I learned a long time ago to take him seriously, but not to take him literally.
They're also,
I think the challenge there, Jimmy, just one second. Poor Jimmy has been really sidelined. I will just say one thing to Yuripzy and then turn it over to Jimmy. I think the problem is.
Wait, Thiru, I want to give you the gavel, please. You're the
I
boss.
just feel bad. I keep cutting Jimmy off.
He'd make a very good judge, Thiru would.
I think the problem is that when the Supreme Court has also been controlled and the president has gone through with things that look like they are unconstitutional and then get to the Supreme Court and are found to be okay because he has packed the court over, having won
I'll push
elections.
back on that, Thiru. He has not packed the court.
Why
We
did
have a Supreme Court that votes, even with the liberals on this court, this Supreme Court votes more than half, 9-0 together. As a matter of fact, the number of times that the liberal judges and the conservative judges vote strictly on their own party is somewhere around 12% each. It is very, very small. So, that's the one thing that I will push back on. So, but go ahead.
We're going to listen. We're going to do Chris, and then we're going to do Jimmy.
No, we're going to
take a break
now because I've been quiet for a long time. So let's go to Jimmy first, okay? First of all, the Supreme Court upheld slavery, first of all, okay? The 14th Amendment that the Democrats love so much as part of the Civil War amendments, 13th, 14th, 15th, that all had to do with slavery, which is what we're talking about right now, okay? So let's at least have some context in this. The Democrats love to talk about the 14th Amendment, but they never put it in any kind of context, had nothing to do with immigration, nothing to do with anchor babies, none of that, ever. And if anybody wants to debate that, I'm more than happy to have that conversation.
All right.
Do that right now. The Equal Protection Clause is what the Republicans used to get the affirmative action case passed in the Supreme Court, the Carolina Harbor case, 2 years ago. And that's in the 14th Amendment, as you probably know, Jimmy. But listen, Trump has signed 50 executive orders. It's the most in the last 4 decades. It's about a blitzkrieg of executive orders. And yeah, he's just hoping to get as many to stick up against the wall as possible, either by the trial court or the appeals court. But listen, most of them, especially where he just lined out the entire first sentence of the 14th Amendment, that has been overturned by several federal judges recently. And as one journalist aptly put, that executive order has died more deaths than Vincent Price in all of his vampire movies.
All right, we're going to take a quick break. Wait, Jimmy.
So as a lawyer, you understand what Trump is doing right now with these executive orders. He's just burying people in paperwork. Do you disagree with that?
No, I don't. I think it's brilliant. It's organized chaos.
Right.
But the state attorney generals are ready for this because they knew it was coming, because they read Project 2025, which focuses on this. And I think he's also doing it as a smokescreen to hide his retribution move to go after the people who investigated him at the FBI and prosecuted him at the DOJ, and be able to whitewash January 6th, the worst moment of his first administration, and get our attention away from those things and focus on these executive orders.
You and I have lunch because...
Yeah, you know what? And you pay. Here's Howard Mallison, some more about our great sponsors, and we'll be back in just a moment.
Thank you, Richard. You know, with the weather conditions the way they are, don't know whether it's going to snow, whether it's going to be ice, who knows? But there's a lot of bad drivers on the road, and they're causing the accidents that are on the rise. So if you experience an accident, the insurance companies cannot tell you where to take your car. That's why more and more drivers are trusting their auto repairs and maintenance to leading edge auto body and mechanical repair. They work on all makes and models and offer free pickup and delivery anywhere in the Baltimore area. So call them at 410-443-6433 or visit them at 5807 Falls Road in the heart of Mountain Washington. They make your car look and run like new again. And Richard and I are proud to represent the law firm of Barry Glazer. Barry always goes the extra mile for his clients, whether it's been a personal injury, medical malpractice, or nursing home neglect. Barry and his staff, that includes an in-house doctor and nurse, make no apologies for getting top dollar from the insurance companies. His clients are his best advertising. So next time you need a lawyer, give Barry Glazer a call at 410-547-8568. Barry Glazer, he gets results. Back to you, Richard.
Jimmy, I see you're sitting quietly, so that's okay, and you all are, and Yuripzy just agreed with Chris, and everybody's happy. I would like to ask this question. How is President Trump allowed to be running the government on executive orders without involving the Congress, who handles the purse strings and passes legislation? Who would like to answer that question?
Well, I'd say he's not. I'd say he's getting blocked where he rightfully should. And I would say that about any president, Republican or Democrat, who issues executive orders outside of their constitutional authority. They get blocked. I mean, he can certainly send out a piece of paper, he can write a piece of paper, sign it, and then get the media all riled up. And then the courts are going to do what courts do, which is, block them where they need to.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, look at DACA. DACA still exists today, even though technically it doesn't have statutory authority or common law authority. It could be breathing its last few moments in the next couple weeks or months, but that has survived because of executive orders. And Yuripzy's right. That's how Obama ruled most of his second term, with executive orders, and they last as long as they remain in place until a subsequent president removes them. And up to this point, most of the time, with the exception of DACA, I think, they've been within constitutional road limits and staying in their lane.
All right, Jimmy, your turn.
So this comes into basic checks and balances. Okay, 70% of the executive orders that Trump has put in place is repealing executive orders that Joe Biden put in place. Okay, there has to be checks and balances. So our Constitution is only as strong as the men and women that we elect to enforce it, is the reality of it. I'm not a big fan of executive orders or executive fiat, however you want to phrase that. Obama was the worst, okay, when it came to this. They should not, executive orders should not be used to create law. But again, the majority of what Trump has done right now is repealing
All right.
what Biden did through executive fiat.
Thiru.
Look, I'm a proud moderate, and I think my problem is that if one, and I have to acknowledge this for Donald Trump, it's like if AOC became president, right? And she did all the things that the extreme flank of the Democratic Party wanted to do by fiat, everybody would go nuts. And I think our government is not served by the extremes on either side actually running amok. There is absolute chaos in what Donald Trump is creating. And it is mainly pandering to a particular block of the Republican Party, which I don't think actually represents the Republican Party. Are there some reasonable and legitimate things there? Absolutely. But the course correction that we've seen, and my party is to blame for this as well. When we started going from George Floyd, who was killed by police officers who ought to have been and should have been and were rightly prosecuted, to abolish the police, we went too far. When we went from let's protecting, legal immigration and making sure that refugees that are properly here are resettled properly, to allowing in millions and millions of people across a porous border, we made a mistake. But the course correction on the other extreme is just as bad, and that's what breaks my heart.
All right, Chris, be brief.
Sure.
Please.
It's about, for me, guardrails. And I think most of the guardrails are gone in Congress. Mike Johnson does what Trump tells him to. And I think John Thune is holding up a bit, especially with keeping the filibuster in place. But with respect to SCOTUS, the Supreme Court, I think one of the most important people we got to keep our eye on in the next 4 years is Amy Coney Barrett, because Roberts has been recruiting her very hard to be a moderate and to form a somewhat moderate wing of the Supreme Court, to be able to get back to a 5-4 court, which acts more reasonably going forward. So let's keep our eye on her and her ruling. She did have a concurring opinion in the immunity case, which showed some promise. But that, I think, is going to be a big deal going forward in terms of guardrails.
Yuripzy, I saw you nodding again on one of Chris's points.
Yeah, there's actually a really cool website that I'll have to send to you, but it keeps track of all the Supreme Court justices and how they vote and their ideology, their supposed ideology. And I think people will find it, or may find it shocking to realize how I guess moderate Amy Coney Barrett can be on certain issues. It was expected because of all the media around her that she was going to be nothing more than a conservative stamp. But I think Chris is absolutely right. That Justice Roberts has done a very good job, or an interesting job of I don't know, kind of, I don't want to say mentoring, because she obviously is an attorney, is a judge in her own right, but she has made some interesting decisions that I don't think would be expected if people believe the media hype around her.
All right, what we're going to do now, we're going to wrap. But by the way, as you know, we record these programs every week on Friday. This is the Friday before the Super Bowl. So we're going to go around the table here or the screen and just tell us who you think is going to win the Super Bowl, and start with our very popular Jimmy Mathis. Who do you pick?
Chiefs.
And that's the extent of your comment. Well, very good.
Yeah. But first of all, I can't stand Philadelphia. I don't like the Eagles. I can't spell Eagles. If I could, I wouldn't say. There's nothing about the Eagles that I like. I don't like the city. I don't understand why it's there's nothing about Philadelphia that I like. And so, yes, I'm the Chiefs on this.
Attorney Yuripzy.
Well, as a Cowboys fan, I obviously have to go with the Chiefs. So, Chiefs. Plus, I like Taylor Swift, so. I have 2 little girls. I have to.
Nobody loves Taylor Swift as much as Thiru. Thiru, who do you pick?
I don't know if Richard knows this or not. I actually really do like Taylor Swift. I hate the Taylor Swift Travis Kelce thing, and I actually do think the Eagles want it more, and I think the Chiefs are more vulnerable than they have ever been, and I want to see their ridiculous dynasty broken. And so with my heart, I'm going to predict the Eagles. But I'm still fuming about Lamar Jackson being edged out last night for MVP.
Well, hard to be broken through.
Quiet. And now Chris Kennedy.
Yeah, I grew up in DC and all my relatives are in Philly, and we've been arguing about DC and the Eagles for decades. And they just put a hurting on my Commanders 2 weeks ago. But listen, I think Patrick Mahomes is going to get the first ever three-peat. I love the guy. I think he's one of the best athletes of all time and one of the best athletes in terms of off the field. He's just a terrific guy, and I'm really rooting for him to get a three-peat with the Chiefs.
All right. Thank you, Chris, Thiru. Thank you, Jimmy, and Yuripzy. We are thrilled to have you back. You are a very important power here on Squirrel. So enjoy the Super Bowl and keep your eyes on Washington. And we'll see you next time when once again we square off. Goodbye, everybody. And thank you for joining.
Bye.
Hi, everyone.